My mother-in-law, Evelyn, discreetly emptied a small vial into my crystal champagne flute. She clinked the glass with a sickening smile and turned to call the entire reception over for a special family toast. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't panic. While she was talking to the crowd, basking in the spotlight, I stepped up beside her, smiled warmly for the cameras, and discreetly switched our glasses when she looked away. I waited with bated breath as she raised the spiked drink to her lips, entirely unaware that her own trap was about to spring shut on her. Before you find out what happened next when she swallowed it, follow my story until the end and far my story has reached. That's when the real drama began. My name is Susan. I am 27 years old, and today was supposed to be the most beautiful day of my life. I stood before the tall mirror in the bridal suite, smoothing down the delicate lace of my white designer wedding dress. Outside those doors, a stunning, upscale vineyard venue in Napa Valley was filled with 200 guests, all waiting to celebrate my marriage to Julian, the love of my life. Julian is everything I ever dreamed of: kind, fiercely loyal, and incredibly supportive. But our relationship had always carried a heavy, exhausting shadow. That shadow belonged to his mother, Evelyn. Evelyn was a woman defined by old money, rigid expectations, and a biting, passive-aggressive cruelty that she wore like a badge of honor. From the very first day Julian introduced us, she made it clear that I didn't belong. I didn't come from a family with a legacy name or a massive trust fund. I had worked hard for everything I achieved as a graphic designer. To Evelyn, that made me an outsider, a temporary distraction she assumed her son would eventually outgrow. During the entire 9 months of wedding planning, she had tried to control, undermine, and diminish every choice I made, dropping subtle slights about the quaint decor and the ordinary menu. Yet, as I looked at my reflection, I took a deep breath, determined to let her bitterness slide off me. I smiled, stepped out of the suite, and walked down the aisle, believing that love would triumph over her malice. I had no idea how far she was willing to go to destroy my happiness. The ceremony itself was flawless. When Julian placed the ring on my finger and kissed me, the roaring applause of our friends made me forget about the icy glare Evelyn had been directing at me from the front row. For a moment, the world felt safe. But the illusion shattered completely just an hour later, right before the grand entrance into the reception hall. I had slipped away to the back corridor to fix a loose hairpin, stepping near a quiet alcove by the kitchen staff entrance. That's when I heard her voice. It was unmistakable, sharp, hurried, and dripping with low-toned venom. Evelyn was speaking to her personal assistant, her back turned to me. "I don't care if it ruins the schedule," she hissed, her manicured fingers tightly clutching a small glass object. "The girl needs a harmless little lesson to understand she doesn't belong here. By the time the first dance is over, she'll be too busy running to the restroom to enjoy a single moment of her precious spotlight. Just make sure the champagne flutes at the head table are arranged exactly how I told you." Hearing those words, a cold dread pooled deep in my stomach. I stood frozen in the shadows, my mind racing as the assistant nodded nervously. I didn't know the exact nature of the substance she held, but a terrifying realization washed over me. My mother-in-law was actively planning to sabotage me on my own wedding night. I took a slow, stabilizing breath, refusing to break down or cause a scene right then. I forced a calm mask onto my face, stepped back into the crowd, and vowed to stay on absolute high alert. I was going to watch her every single move. When we were called out to the head table, I kept my eyes pinned on Evelyn. She sat just a few feet away, projecting the image of a proud, elegant matriarch, but I could see the restless anticipation in her posture. After the main course was cleared, the venue staff began filling our crystal champagne flutes for the traditional family toasts. I watched intently as Evelyn deliberately caught the eye of a specific waiter, who placed a heavily chilled flute directly in front of my seat. Shortly after, under the pretense of adjusting the large floral centerpiece between us, Evelyn reached out. Through the gaps in the roses, I saw her hands move with practiced speed, emptying a tiny vial of clear liquid into my glass. She then tapped the side of her own flute, standing up to command the room's attention. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please," Evelyn announced into the microphone, her voice smooth and dripping with artificial warmth. As the 200 guests turned toward her, clapping and cheering, she launched into a beautifully rehearsed speech about family values and welcoming me into their prestigious lineage. She was completely wrapped up in her own performance, basking in the crowd's adulation. This was my moment. While her head was turned to the left to smile for a photographer, I casually reached forward. Under the cover of the loud applause, I deftly swapped my spiked glass with her identical one. When she turned back to face me, I was sitting perfectly still, a calm smile on my face. She lifted her glass, locking her cold eyes onto mine in a silent, triumphant challenge. To Susan and Julian, she toasted and took a deep, continuous gulp of the liquid. I raised my glass to my lips, pretending to drink while watching her throat swallow every drop. Within 5 minutes, the smug satisfaction on her face began to freeze. A sudden, violent wave of sweat broke across her forehead. Her eyes widened in sheer panic, and her hands began to tremble as she stared down at her empty glass. Evelyn's sophisticated posture disintegrated in a matter of seconds. It became immediately obvious that she hadn't used something lethal or dangerous enough to warrant a medical emergency. She was far too calculated to risk a police investigation. Instead, she had opted for an incredibly potent, rapid-acting liquid laxative and nausea inducer. Her malicious intention had been to humiliate me completely, causing me to violently ruin my white designer wedding dress right in the middle of the crowded dance floor before the eyes of all her high society peers. But instead, the poison pill she had meticulously prepared for me was now tearing through her own digestive system. The change was dramatic. Her face warped from a pale, pasty white to an awful shade of deep green. She gripped the edge of the head table so tightly her manicured nails turned white, a low, involuntary groan escaping her lips. Julian turned to her, his brow furrowing with sudden concern. "Mom, are you okay? You look incredibly sick." Evelyn couldn't even manage a coherent reply. She let out a sharp gasp, clutching her stomach violently as her entire body shuddered. Panic completely overrode her lifelong obsession with etiquette and poise. She bolted from her chair, knocking a massive tray of crystal champagne flutes to the floor in her desperation. The loud, shattering crash echoed through the entire venue, drawing the shocked eyes of all 200 guests. They watched in absolute, stunned silence as the proud, untouchable matriarch of the family lost all remaining composure, stumbling blindly across the polished dance floor while weeping in sheer agony, frantically trying to reach the venue's private restrooms before her time completely ran out. The elegant reception hall devolved into a low murmur of confused whispers as the music was abruptly cut. Julian, looking deeply alarmed and incredibly embarrassed, immediately stood up to follow the chaotic trail his mother had left behind. I kept close to his side, playing the role of the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly as we made our way to the private VIP holding rooms near the back of the venue. When we reached the door, the venue manager was already standing outside, looking pale and unsure of what to do. From inside the room, the muffled sounds of frantic, pathetic sobbing and furious slamming could be heard. Evelyn was completely undone. Julian knocked urgently, shouting through the wood to ask if she needed emergency medical attention. Evelyn's voice shot back, weak but dripping with absolute rage, claiming she had been poisoned by the venue's careless catering department. Julian turned to the manager, his face twisted in worry, and asked him to quickly fetch some ice water and a medical kit from the front desk. The moment Julian stepped down the corridor and left us alone, I quietly pushed the door open and stepped inside the dimly lit room. Evelyn was slumped in an armchair, her expensive designer dress disheveled, her makeup ruined by tears, and her pride completely shattered. She looked up, her eyes flashing with pure malice when she saw me. I didn't say a word at first. I simply stepped closer, leaned down until I was just inches from her face, and whispered with a cold, unwavering smile, "How did your own medicine taste, Evelyn?" Her jaw dropped, the harsh realization hitting her like a physical blow. She erupted into a bitter, venomous confession, screaming that I was an ungrateful parasite who deserved to be humiliated. But she was so consumed by her own rage that she completely failed to notice the door clicking open behind her. Julian had walked right back into the room, catching every single word of her confession. The air in the small room froze instantly. Julian stood in the doorway, the glass of ice water trembling in his hand before it shattered against the floor, mirroring the complete destruction of his relationship with his mother. His face was a mask of pure shock and disgust as the words of Evelyn's bitter confession echoed off the walls. For years, he had tried to defend her, constantly making excuses for her cold behavior and telling me that she just needed time to adjust. But hearing her raw, venomous admission that she had actively tried to medically sabotage and publicly humiliate his new bride on our wedding day stripped away every ounce of his loyalty. He stepped forward, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm, low register that I had never heard from him before. "Get out," he said, looking at his mother as if she were an absolute stranger. Evelyn froze, her tear-streaked face twisting into a desperate expression as she tried to backpedal, stammering that she was just upset and that I was manipulating the situation. But Julian didn't want to hear another lie. He turned directly to her terrified personal assistant, who was hovering in the hallway, and gave a strict, final order to pack Evelyn's things and remove her from the vineyard immediately. He threatened that if she ever tried to contact either of us again, or if she stepped foot near our home, he would personally hand over the venue's security footage to the police and press full criminal charges for assault. Evelyn was quietly escorted out the back doors of the venue in total, undisputed disgrace, stripped of all her power and high society dignity. Julian returned to my side, wrapping his arms around me and apologizing through his own tears. We walked back out together, announcing to the remaining guests that his mother had simply suffered a sudden case of severe food poisoning, allowing us to finish our beautiful night in peace. 3 months have passed since that unforgettable night, and our lives have completely transformed. Julian and I made the mutual decision to pack up our things, sell our corporate apartment, and move across the country to a charming, sunlit cottage tucked away in a quiet coastal town. We cut off all communication with Evelyn entirely, blocking her numbers and returning her desperate, hollow letters of apology unopened. Julian finally saw his mother for the manipulative person she truly was, and choosing our peace over her toxic wealth was the easiest decision he ever made. We are finally building a life rooted in genuine love, free from her constant judgment. But I didn't just walk away. I made sure we were permanently protected. Before we left the wedding venue that night, I safely secured the original spiked champagne glass and handed it over to a private lab for independent chemical testing. The results came back confirming an incredibly high, unsafe concentration of a restricted prescription compound. I quietly forwarded that lab report, along with a copy of the venue's security footage showing Evelyn pouring the liquid, straight to our family attorney. It is our permanent legal shield. If she ever tries to interfere with our marriage, our finances, or our future children, those documents will go straight to the district attorney. Now, as I sit peacefully on my porch watching the sunset over the ocean, I can't help but smile at how everything turned out. Evelyn tried to use my wedding day to destroy me, but she only ended up destroying her own legacy. I'm curious about you who listened to my story. If you caught your in-laws trying to sabotage your biggest day, would you have switched the glasses like I did? Or expo? And don't forget to tell me which part of the world you are tuning in from today. If you love stories where toxic people get exactly what they deserve, click on one of the 2 videos popping up on your screen right now. Trust me, the twists in those will leave you completely speechless. Thank you for listening to my journey today, and I'll